So the first tip is be sure your rhythm part is consistent. A simple, consistent part is always going to be better than a real virtuoso kind of a part that's changing and going crazy from one bar to the next. In fact, the way I look at it, if you can describe your part in a couple of simple words, chances are it's going to be a really good part. Now we're talking about parts that work in pop rock songs. If you listen to a studio record, probably a lot of the difference between a live sort of garage band and a studio record is you'll find exactly what I'm talking about. The parts that the musicians are playing are simple, consistent, defined parts. Like when I say describe it, in other words, if somebody asks me, what part are you playing here? And I say, I'm doing broken chord eighth notes in the verse. Now what that means is, every measure is a different chord, but that rhythmic figure is the same. And through the whole verse, it's that one part. And then when I go to the chorus, then I'm going to go to big solid quarter notes. You see what I'm saying? Easy to describe and very easy to distinguish one section from the other, right? Now, another tip would be, and this is just a great rule that really separates mature musicians, you have to know how to work around a melody. The simple rule is you need to be less active when the melody is active, and you need to be more active when the melody is resting. Make sense? This is called counter melody. So in other words, it's kind of like a conversation. If you're having a conversation with somebody, if there's two people involved, it just makes sense that you need to be listening 50% of the time, right? Now you're still engaged in the conversation, but if you're talking more than 50% of the time, well, you're probably talking too much then. And it's kind of like that in music. If you're accompanying a melody and you're kind of dancing around a melody, you need to be listening, being less active, and then when the melody takes a breath, that's kind of your moment to come through with your little counter melodic line, and then tuck back under when the melody becomes active. Make sense? I love this saying, have you ever heard the saying, if notes are silver, then rests are gold? You get the picture? Sometimes the most important notes that you play are the notes that you don't play. So resting is important. Another thing to remember is that an instrument's most significant note is its entrance, right? So in other words, once the instrument is in, it becomes part of the fabric. So what that implies is, if you want to have that impact again in the song, well, that means you got to drop out someplace. Because it's only if you drop out can you make another entrance. Now again, this is kind of what separates your basic garage band from a real tight, great sounding studio band. Too many garage bands, it's kind of like you count off the song, bam, everybody's in, playing full out all the time from the beginning of the song all the way to the end. I oftentimes use the analogy, my daughter, when she was little, she used to take her plate of food, and the first thing she'd do is she'd take a fork, so she's got like, chicken nuggets and mashed potatoes and peas, and she would just go like, mush the whole thing into one big glob. And I would say, if you do that, it's okay, but that means every bite of your meal is going to taste exactly the same. There's no variety. And that's how a lot of bands play. It's like we're all in at the front and we're all playing through the whole song until we cut off. So every bar of that piece sounds exactly the same. Versus, think about this, if you leave the peas separate and the chicken nuggets separate, and you get to savor what the mashed potatoes taste like on their own. You get to hear what that acoustic guitar sounds like, really clean and isolated, nothing else going on. And then when the bass enters, maybe halfway through verse 1, wow, the bass coming in is a big deal. And then when the keyboards add on at the chorus, wow, it's a whole new element. And maybe if the guitar player's smart, maybe for verse 2, maybe he drops out so that the keyboard can kind of shine through, because if the first verse was a guitar, let's make the second verse keyboard. So then when the guitar player does come back in, wow, it's like, oh, I hadn't heard that element before, so now it's fresh and new again. You get what I'm talking about? So you have to learn when to not play and how significant it is when you drop out. That means you get to come back in. You got to learn this conversation thing. You have to learn when it's time to sort of be supporting, but at the same time, when it's time for your instrument to step out and come through and then tuck back in. So these are just tips that'll help make your part more significant, make it sound more like a studio record rather than a garage band.